Greetings, Pilgrims, to episode 21 of the Polygon Pilgrimage. Today, I have a special treat for you. We are continuing our series of tool demos, and I'm going to show you one of my absolute favorite tools, Hedis UV Layout. This is a nice little program made by a great guy named Phil. He has made a tool that you guys are going to love. At the top here, you see their website here, uvlayout.com. It says in minutes, not hours, and man, he means it. I sent him a review of this program and I quoted, "The shortest distance between 2 points is always a straight line. The shortest time between modeling and texturing is UV layout." And I guarantee you that is true. I'm going to show you a brief introduction to this program. There are some great tutorials. There's even video tutorials on the site here where Phil himself will sit down and show you how the tool works. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get started. Alright, so here we are inside of Max, and I have a model here that was graciously donated to me by a client. This is a armor set for one of his creatures, and we're going to be unwrapping this in UV layout. So let's go ahead and export this out of Max. I'm going to say export selected. I'm going to choose my file here, and I've already done it once, but there we are, OBJ exporter. You must export as an OBJ in order for UV layout to take in the information. And I'm going to uncheck texture coordinates because that's the point of a UV layout program. And I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to minimize Max, and we are going to take the start.obj. And the really nice thing about UV layout here is I can just take this, drag it, and drop it on there, and it will start to load the file. Amazing. So here's the file, and I have a couple options right away. I always want to check this clean and weld UVs. This will do some pre-calculation and make sure that the model is acceptable for unwrapping. And you can choose here edit or new on the UVs. So like I said before, if you have textures that you already have set but you want to just work with them a little bit more, you can do that here by saying edit, but we're going to go with new. So I'm going to click load, and here we are. So let me make this a little bit bigger, and let's go over the interface briefly and how to do this, and let's get started. Alright, so here we have our model, and we're ready to start cutting seams. Now the nice thing about UV layout is with many packages, this is a visual approach to unwrapping. So you get to see the model the whole time. And what our goal here is to tell UV layout where we want it to cut the seams. So all you're going to be doing is pointing and hitting the C button, saying cut, but what we're going to do is we're going to tell it how we want it to cut. So over here you see it says untag edges 0, 1, and 10. 0 just means only cut exactly where I tell you to. 1 means add one more edge along the edge loop. And 10 means wherever I click, add 10 more selection edges along that edge loop. So if we have it at 10, and we say I want to unfold the belt. Well, I know I want the seam to be in the back of the belt where it's not likely to be seen, and I'm just going to hit the C key once, and you'll see it selects all the rest of the edges along that edge loop because it's under 10. So that one's done. So I'm going to hold shift and hit S, and that will split the seam open, and I'm going to hit D. D is to drop it to the 2D layout when you're finished with selecting seams in this 3D layout. So if you don't need any seams, such as for the pauldron here, you just hit D. And for the, I'm sorry, that was the tabard. These are the pauldrons. I hit D, and there you go. And you can see how quickly this goes. Now for the helmet here, I know that it needs to be cut directly in half per art direction. So I'm going to put a seam here, and I'm just going to point here and hit C. And there we go. So now if I hold Shift S, split it in half, drop and drop, and I've only got one more piece. Look at how fast we've been doing this. So I'm going to cut this one up a little funny at first because I have a great tool that I want to show you later on. So don't mind the mess. I'm going to drop that piece, and I'm going to arbitrarily cut it in half here and here. And you'll think, whoa, what are you doing? But it's okay. Now you'll notice when I drop this last piece, it's going to show me the model again. And all the pieces that I've already dropped come back. This is because it has indicated that I have dropped every single shell, and it's now showing me, here's where you've decided to place your seams. Is this okay? I think it's great. We're ready to go. So I'm going to hit the 1 button on my keyboard, and this takes me to my 2D layout editor. So let's take a moment here and we're going to jump into the 2D layout editor. Okay, so here we are in the 2D layout editor, and one of the most important things about UV unwrapping is keeping proper 1-to-1 ratio for your textile density. Okay, those are big words. What am I saying? What I'm saying is each part of the model needs to be relative in size to its proportion to every other part of the model. So the helmet is about twice the size of a pauldron. Well, it needs to remain such on the sheet. Otherwise, one part of the model is going to get more or less texture detail than its neighboring part, and it's going to look stupid when it's on screen. So that's one of the amazing things about UV layout is it does that for you. That's right, it does it for you. No math, no fuss, it just does it. And, oh, by the way, it will automatically pack your textures for you. Pack your UV shells for you. Now, it's not perfect, it is a program, so a lot of times I do some tweaking, but for the most part, if you just want to pack something pretty quick, this is the way to go. So let's look at how we're going to take each of these shells and flatten them out properly. Alright, so to unwrap a shell, what we're going to do is we're going to point at it and just hit Shift and F. And it's going to do 2 stages. This first stage is a pelt map. It's just going to stretch everything out, give it some breathing room. And when you hit spacebar, it will go to stage 2. And this is the actual unflattening or unfolding stage. And it's going to calculate the optimal distance between points. And you'll see it'll keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. And at the top here it says hold space to stop, 40 something seconds. It will go for a timer, so you can batch process a lot of things at once. It'll just go wait so long for one stage and then go to the next stage. Really incredible, really useful for models that have thousands of little shells just because of the way it needs to be unwrapped. So I'm going to go ahead and hit spacebar to stop it. And now using my spacebar and left click, I can rotate it around. Spacebar and middle click, I can actually move it. So now I'm going to go ahead and do these really quick. We're just going to fly through them. I'll show you this is how I would unwrap this object, and this is how fast it actually goes. So we say right there is pretty good. Alright, I'm going to rotate that to kind of a vertical alignment, move it over, unflatten this guy, there we go. Now these two, we can actually mirror the unwrap from one to the other. So I'm going to move that one over, and this one I'm just going to do it kind of half-assed. There we go. Move it over here. And I will show you how we can copy this to this. So same thing over here, I'm going to unflatten one, and we'll use that to copy to the other one. So this is going to be pretty good there. There's going to be a little bit of stretching there because of the nature of the shape. Nothing we can really do there, so let's go ahead and get this one folded out. And there we go. And now we've got one object left. And this one's a little bit of a special case. We're going to go over a particular tool that is really good for if you have, say you have a hard surface model. So you're thinking, hey, all these tools you've been showing are really good, but I need a hard surface tool. Well, here, let me flatten these out, and I'll show you some incredible tools here for hard surfacing. There we go. And one more. And it's complete. Right there. So, quick aside about hard surface models is there is a wonderful tool over here. You can see segment, and in here there's the fast weld. So you say on. This is great. You just left click and it's going to kind of ghost you the solution and say if you were to weld this seam, this is the seam that it goes to and this is the chunk. So if you like it, then you just say enter, and I'm just going to left click here and say enter. And there you go. So if you have a thing that needs to be unfolded in that way, this is a great way to be able to just reattach everything right quick. Secondarily, if I go turn off the fast weld, if I have a shell here and I say, I unfolded this, but I'm learning and I was told, hey, try and get fewer seams, and this could actually be no seams if you do it right. So you say, okay, well, now I need to re-weld all these seams, and I don't want to do all that by hand. No problem. Just point at the seam and hit W, and then you're going to start welding. Weld, 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 weld. Just, go along here, get them all welded. There we go. Weld the very ends. Weld, weld. And we can stitch that right back up. And now if we flatten this again, voila, perfect. Done with that piece. And there in just a few seconds there, probably less than 2 minutes, what we've done is we've gotten everything unfolded and we're ready to move forward. And when we come back here in a moment, we're going to combine these two things. We're going to combine these two things, and we're going to see about packing this in an automatic fashion. Alright, so we have some shells here that we know are identical and we want them to share texture space. So to copy those over, you come up here just under the word symmetry, you see copy UVs. I'm going to click that. Now I have to select two edges. I'm going to select an edge in my source and the identical edge in my destination. And if I hit spacebar, now they're copied over top of one another. Now, right now they're just copied, and if I do a packing, it's going to split them. They're going to be the same shape now, but it's going to split them around the texture space. And that might be what you want, but for this instance, I want them to stay together because I know they're going to be identical always. So how do I keep them together but tell it that I want it to move around? Well, I'm going to drag and select them both. And under here, under the pack menu, I'm going to click this thing that says New Box. And you'll see what that does is that puts them together and says treat these as a group that doesn't move from within the group, but moves amongst the rest of the texture shells. So that's what that's going to do for us, and that's really great. So now I'm going to copy some more UVs and say these two guys need to be identical. I'm going to select those, and I'm going to put those in a box. There we go. Now, believe it or not, we're done. So now it comes to the packing. And the packing is pretty simple. What we're going to do is set our settings here for the UV layout pack to fast. I'm going to say rotate. And the bleeding here, bleeding is how much space you want in pixels in between shells. So I'm going to say 4 pixels. That seems good to me. And all I have to do is click somewhere in the background here and hit the right bracket key, and it will start to automatically figure out how to pack it best. Now it'll give you some information here that the progress bar in the middle, how long it's going to take to finish. Up at the top it says hold space to stop. So you can stop it at any point you think, okay, that's good enough. And at the bottom here, something that might make you do that, is it'll say, I'm rotating the shells, but it's been a while since the last improvement. Really, this is as good as I think I can do with the settings you've given me. So I'm going to go ahead and stop it. There we go. And I can always select my UV shells here, and I can move them around myself. So I'm going to move these around a little bit. There we go. And I can put all of these in a box and say, treat those all as one, and rerun it. So now rerun it, and it will figure out, hey, what are all the different ways I could possibly do this? And it's going to try lots of things. But when you come up with one that you like, or when it finishes, you just hold the stop. And here's another great thing I like about this. It'll show you at the top here what percentage of the texture space you're using up. This is something that a lot of people are concerned about, and for good reason. You want to make sure you're using the most of your texture. But this is a good way to gauge kind of like your score. If you look at it this way, if you take a model and you use it as an unwrapping practice, try and unwrap it a couple different ways, pack it as much as you can here, run the thing, and it'll tell you how well it was able to pack things based upon the shapes you've given yourself. So if you look at this, there are ways to do this in Photoshop to figure out the textile coverage. And you say, okay, what was your score? Try and get closer. Obviously, you want 100%, but you're never going to reach 100% unless your model is a square. You know, that's the only way to do it. But this is a great way to tell you, give an indication of how well it's packed. Now from here, let's take a look at it in the 3D editor where we can see how the textures are going to be laid out. Alright, so now that we have all of our textures laid out, we want to see what it's going to look like on the model. So if we hit the 3 key, you'll see it brings back the model, but we don't see our seams any longer. But what we do see is initially a colored representation of how much stretching or how much distortion the textures have. And right now it's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to hit the T key on the keyboard, and you'll see this will switch us to a traditional checkered format, and you can see the areas that the texture needs work in. And you can see other areas like the pauldrons and the tabard here that look amazing, and you can tell that they're well unwrapped because there's no distortion. It kind of flows over the shape, and all the squares are the same size. Now you can increase or decrease the size of these if your model is a different size by hitting the plus or minus keys on the keyboard. So I can increase this in order to see it more clearly, or decrease it if my model is not that big and I don't need it to be that big. You can also hit the T key one more time, and it will switch to one of these numbered sheets This is really useful for really pointing out distortion, but also for telling orientation, proper orientation. So I can see that my tabard, by the way, is upside down. So you know that right away from the front here. Oh, actually it's not. Sorry, it's right side up. There it is, and it just, because it flows over the top, that it's upside down looking in the front. So see, that's a good way to explore these things and know what's going on with your texture based upon this this grid pattern here. Now you can hit T again and it will take you back to your colored squares here, and you can cycle through them. So I generally just kind of stick to this. I'll check this out to make sure that everything is going well, and then I'll just check here to make sure of my distortions and what I need to fix. But let's say we're happy with this and we're done, and we want to take this model back into our 3D modeling program so we can continue to apply textures, see how they look. Well, we want to do that up at the top here. We say save. I'm going to save this out as unwrap complete, which I've already done in the previous, but I'm going to do it again here. So say save. There we go. I'll dismiss the dialog. You can also see here it says TMP, temp. These are 5 slots that you can store your UVs temporarily while you're working on them. So that's a really nice feature to say, I'm working on it, let me store it as a temp. Working on it, store as a temp. Because you don't want to get into a really complex unwrap and have it crash or something bad happen and you say, oh, I wish I had like an intermediary step. That's what this does for you. So we're all done here, so I'm just going to show you real quick how it comes back into Max, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay, so here we are in Max once again, and here's our original model. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say import, say complete, open. I'm going to make sure that texture coordinates is checked. Say OK. And here's the model. And the only thing I don't like about UV layout, and it's not even its fault, is that when you re-import a OBJ into Max, it always comes in as an editable mesh, and I like to work in editable poly. So that's just a preference, but there we go. So I'm going to select all the polygons here and make sure that they are all set to 1. And I'm going to change the default coloring and everything. I don't like that. There we go. So we're back to regular standards for me. And let's go ahead and look at our unwrap. So if I pull up an UV unwrap and say edit, you can see clearly there's our layout as we did it inside of UV layout, and it's perfect. And I can even scale things in here, move things around. I can hand edit points a little bit better here. You can hand edit points inside of UV layout, by the way, and it has some other amazing tools. Some of the best tools on there are that it has a tool that will allow you to symmetry, but then also it has another tool that will allow you to repaint a map. So if I had this texture and I texture this and I'm ready to go, and then all of a sudden somebody says, oh well, we need to move this around, or we're going to add something, or actually it's best if you move things around. If you move this over here and this over here, well, your texture is broken now. But UV layout has, you can import the original texture, import the UV layout now of the original and of the new, and it will figure out on a per pixel basis where the shell moved to, and it will repaint your texture for you. Now it's not perfect, obviously, it's mathematics, but I've seen some of the results and they look amazing. For a simple tool that will just do that for you, that's major, get you out of crisis mode. So that's definitely something to look into. Guys, it has hundreds of other great little tools in it. I really recommend you go to the website here, check out the videos. I mean, Phil does a fantastic job. I can't even speak right. That's how great of a job he does. And you just look at this tool and you will fall in love with it. Now the tool is free to try, and when you purchase it, it is $100 or $200 or something like that. Honestly, well worth the time spent saving the money if you need to. It does come with a physical USB dongle that you have to plug in order to use it, but that's really no big deal. Honestly, it's well worth it. So check it out, guys, and have some great fun unwrapping for once. And you'll get it done so fast that you'll have plenty of times for other things. And when you do the batch processing, even you can get up and go get a drink of coffee or something and say, hey, my tool is unwrapping for me right now. So enjoy. Please enjoy the quote at the bottom of the page, and I'll see you next time as the pilgrimage continues.